New official figures indicate that a higher percentage of workers in Scotland are now relying on zero-hours contracts than elsewhere in the UK. It's estimated that 105,000 people here do not have set hours from week to week. Some people are attracted by the flexibility this can offer, but the STUC and others say the arrangements are exploitative.
Unless you're a student or you're still living at home, that flexibility doesn't really tend to matter. There's no stability, there's no security. You can never really plan for anything financially. Any economic downturn usually hits workers in hospitality on zero-hour contracts twofold, both like in your bills and at the supermarket, and then also in the hours that you receive at work. So I think that as much as a very small section of the labour market might benefit, if you're a student or if you're only looking for like beer money, but if you're actually trying to pay bills or have any sort of life, it's just got very significant drawbacks. Everyone that I work with in a zero-hour contract is currently working towards trying to achieve contracts in our own work.
We discussed the use of zero-hours contracts with the STUC General Secretary Ros Foyer and Colin Wilkinson, who is the Managing Director of the Scottish Licensed Trade Association. So Colin, why are zero-hour contracts a good thing?
Well, I think there's an appropriate place for them. I think, for the flexibility that businesses need and for people as well, there is a place for having zero-hour contracts. It offers the flexibility for people who are maybe looking for a second job, for students, people that are looking to have some extra income or going through, financial crisis at the moment. So there is a place for them, and it's something that we don't think should be totally banned.
So what's not to like about everything Colin said there, Ros?
Well, they do offer flexibility, but the problem is they offer lots of flexibility and lots of power to employers, and there's not much flexibility in not being clear on what your paycheck's going to be at the end of the month, or being scared to raise issues at work, or having to cancel your social life in case you miss a shift. And that's the reality for far too many workers on these cruel contracts.
But doesn't it suit some people just to have that flexibility?
Well, you can have flexibility in a fixed-hour contract with a minimum number of hours bolted in, but for far too many people, we're actually topping a poll of shame now in Scotland in terms of how many workers are on zero-hours contracts. We've seen them go up by almost 10,000 over a 6-month period, and I will warrant that most of these workers do not want to be in such a precarious position. They simply have no choice.
And why do you think, Ros, that Scotland has such a high rate by comparison to the rest of the UK?
Well, I think the reason that they're going up is because the economy is going so badly. We have a UK government who cares very little for ordinary working people and have put ordinary small businesses, who I actually have a lot of sympathy with, under real pressure with rising energy costs and many other costs. But ordinary workers can't be left to pay for this economic crisis. Zero-hours contracts need to be outlawed. They are cruel and they do not allow people financial security in the workplace.
Colin, why do you think Scotland has got such a high rate?
Well, I think hospitality is a big industry in Scotland, and tourism as well. And we, unfortunately, it's very seasonal, and particularly in rural areas. So there has to be that kind of flexibility to be able to get staff and also provide jobs in these areas. One of the things I would also add to is that, I think we're seeing a growing trend in work-life balance. Not so many people now really want to work 9 to 5, 5 days a week as I have, and they're looking at having some more flexibility. And if they're willing to put in some hours when it suits them, businesses would very much welcome that, because, let's be honest, the hospitality industry, we're crying out for staff. So I think, good operators, good employers will do what they can to accommodate their staff.
What about Ros's point, though, that you can have that flexibility but still have at least some basic conditions?
Well, yes, I think there should be that. As I said earlier, there's an appropriate place for these types of contracts where it suits the employee who wants that flexibility. They may have another job, young family, there may be a student studying, so it gives them the opportunity to be flexible in the hours that they can actually work. And from the employment point of view, the industry is very much struggling and needs as much flexibility as it can to maintain the business and the jobs that it provides.
And on that, Rose, particularly hospitality, struggling and needing to get staff.
Yes, absolutely, but I would warn that most workers out there are actually looking for a bit of stability and security rather than the sort of flexibility that's been talked about, and there are far too many zero-hours contracts being offered by employers. Now, as I said before, I can understand the pressures that small businesses are under. That means they feel they need to offer this sort of employment to give them that flexibility because, you know, times are really tight. But what we need is a government that is prepared to put caps on energy bills to lower costs for businesses and for individuals so that businesses can make a legitimate profit without taking the profit out of workers' pockets, and ordinary workers, some of the most vulnerable people are the ones who end up on zero-hours contracts. Young people, BAME workers, you know, being in that sort of precarious employment is no joke. You try and get some credit or a mortgage if you're on a zero-hours contract. This is no way for people to live. People need dignity and they should be outlawed.
Colin, we're hearing this phrase, we're discussing this phrase about zero-hour contracts. How exactly do they work?
Well, basically, it gives a pool of staff that a business can use and call upon them when there's a need. But from the staff's point of view, they don't have to actually accept the offer of hours that the employer is giving. So that's why it's great, really, for in appropriate circumstances. You know, in particular, you know, if there's special events where you're needing a large number of staff to be at a premises. And what we are seeing as well is that there's a growth in the sort of staff agency apps where people can sign up to be available for so many hours a week if they want to do that. And businesses are now turning to those to try and get staff when they need them. So, you know, that's also seen as, you know, not a fixed term of hours that people will be working. They'll just be available or offer their availability for businesses that need them.
But isn't it just an opportunity for businesses to exploit staff?
No, I would disagree with that. Good operators will do everything that they can for their staff and to be flexible, because if the staff's not happy, then, you know, that's a huge negative impact on your business. And most operators are struggling to get staff. We're seeing them offering bonuses, extra incentives to actually stay with current employers. We're even seeing some people offering transfer fees, for the want of a better word. So, you know, the industry is doing all it can to keep its staff and keep them happy.
And Rose, maybe the other side of that is, are the unions opposed to it because it doesn't allow for unionisation and the things that unions push for?
Well, I wouldn't say that zero-hours contracts detract from workers gaining unionisation. In fact, I would say that if you want to try and tackle an employer who is dealing with zero-hours contracts, the best way to go about that is to join up with your colleagues, join a union and do something collective about that and regain the power in that relationship. This is essentially the problem, is that the employer holds all of the cards. If you're a worker, yes, you can technically on paper choose to knock back a shift, but you might not get a shift again in a hurry if you do that. And that is the reality that we hear in feedback from many, many workers who work in the hospitality industry. You know, all the power is in the employer's hands, and workers are scared to raise issues when they're employed on zero hours and precarious contracts.
You said you want them banned. How would that work?
Well, there should be an ability for a worker to set hours as part of their contract, but we would certainly like to see zero hours not being an option that any employer, you know, if you're employing someone, you're employing them to work. And if you're having a contract of employment, by all means, if you only want a temporary worker, go to an agency to fill a temporary spot. But if that's going to be someone's life for 4 years, 5 years, that is not a temporary job. And for many people in the hospitality industry, that is the reality. They've been on zero-hours contracts for years. They're not able to build a sustainable life or a good standard of living because of that precarity. OK,
just briefly and finally, Colin, what would that mean for your industry and other industries if it were banned?
Well, we've got so many burdens being thrown at us at the moment. Another one would certainly be unwelcome. I do agree, in cases where people do have a regular shift pattern, then it is inappropriate in a way to have 0-hour contracts. But a lot of businesses are surviving because that's available. And as I say, for individuals who are looking for extra jobs because of this crisis that we're in at the moment, are looking for some flexibility or a better work-life balance, that should remain open to those that want that.
Colin, Rose, thank you both for joining us in Scotland Tonight.
Thank you.